My appointment was canceled for being 5 minutes late. I guess I have to reschedule. This happened about 4 years ago, when I got a summer job at my university. The job was working for professors that I had worked with before, and they asked me last minute to teach a summer workshop to 9th and 10th graders. So with less than 2 weeks before the camp starts, I have a bunch of paperwork to do first, including clearances that say I can work with kids. One of these is an official FBI check for which they need my fingerprints. Well, I needed to do the physical fingerprinting right away in order to get the result in time. Luckily, I was able to book a fingerprinting appointment for that Friday, booked 24 hours in advance, as required, which would be just barely enough time to get the result. That Friday I catch the subway to campus and it's atrociously slow. I'll admit I should have planned for this. The subway here is always behind. Anyway, I end up slightly late getting to campus, so I literally run to the police station and enter the front room at exactly 5 minutes after my appointment time. I know this because, as I stepped through the door, I felt my phone buzz with what turned out to be a "your appointment has been canceled" email. I speak to the security cop behind bulletproof glass in sight and I learn the app was canceled after he checks my confirmation number. Apparently they are automatically canceled if you're not checked in within 5 minutes. Obviously this is outrageous, but I'm usually a patient guy. I ask if I can book a new appointment. That's no good since it would have to be Monday or later. So I grab a coffee from across the street and return to sit inside the police station. To try and solve this with some Googling while I slip into a more and more frantic state of frustration. I can't find anywhere in the city that can fingerprint me before Monday. But here's what really pushed me over the edge. While I'm sitting there, at this point 30 minutes past my appointment time, someone else comes in for fingerprints. She shows up 5 minutes early. They take her in immediately, and she's out before her appointment was even scheduled to begin. The entire thing took her about 2 minutes. I point out to the cop behind the glass, as politely as I can, that clearly someone could see me right now because her appointment is already over. Why can't I have the current slot? But the cop insists that since my appointment was canceled, my registration info was no longer in the system and I can't be seen today. That's when the idea comes to me and I confirm with him that showing up early is not a problem, because they would have my app and registration info in the system. You see where I'm going with this? So I quietly sit back down and take out my phone. About 10 minutes later, I calmly approach him again and say hello. I have a new appointment to be fingerprinted. I'm about 72 hours early. I have never seen such an exasperated sigh in my life. But he checked my new confirmation number and everything was in order. Within 10 minutes, I was walking back out after getting fingerprinted. TL. Doctor appointment was automatically canceled because I was 5 minutes late. I can't go in now because my registration info is not in the system. But I can make an appointment for Monday and show up 72 hours early. You are not allowed to decide when to eat lunch. Got it, boss? Kind of short, but TLDR at bottom. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. This was some time ago, probably early 2000s. But this event is burned into my brain. I'm sure over the years the story has been embellished a bit, but the core of the story is told exactly as it happened. I've worked in K-12 education technology most of my 20-plus years in my professional career. When I first started, I was the only technician for a small medium school district, 2,500 or so students. During the time of this event, the Director of Special Education, SPED, was married to the superintendent. I reported to the business manager who used to teach technology but was not a technical person. For the most part, I was left to do my work and was not overly micromanaged. So I got into a habit of taking my lunch whenever I felt like it or even not at all. If I didn't take lunch and there was no pressing work, I would just leave a little early at the end of the day. Of course, I made sure all the schools were out before I left. As time goes on, I got in trouble for leaving early, so I would take my lunch whenever time permitted. Sometimes it was when there was only an hour left from work, sometimes not. But I would chill at my desk and just screw off. The others in the office where my desk was reported me for screwing off every afternoon. When I tried to explain to the business manager that I was taking my lunch, she says something to effect of, "You can longer take your lunch whenever you want. Your lunch is from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. I say, "No problem." Message received. So starting that day, no matter what I was doing, at 12 o'clock I would stop what I was doing and take my lunch. If I was at my desk, I would screw off. If I was at a school site, I would go sit in my car. Fast forward a month or two later, at about 11:30 the director of SPED calls and says his computer is not working and I need to come fix it right away. I say sure thing, on my way. When I get to his office, he says please fix it and heads off to a meeting. So I start in on removing all spyware he has managed to collect. At this time all employees were local admins on their desktops. About 1/3 of the way through 12 o'clock hits, I stand up and walk out of his office and tell his secretary I'll be back in an hour. Out to my car I go, expecting a phone call any minute, and sure enough about 15 minutes in I get a phone call from the business manager. Here's about how the call goes. BM, business manager, my boss, and me. BM, I hear you walked out of the SPED director's office without fixing his computer. ME, correct. It is my lunch time. BM, what do you mean? You couldn't fix his computer first? ME, I could have. But you told me that I could not decide when my lunch break was. That I had to take lunch from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. BM, wait, that's not what I meant. ME, but that is what you said. If I stayed and worked on the computer and took my lunch at 1 o'clock or 1:30, I did not want to get in trouble for screwing off when I was supposed to be working. BM, okay, I'll call you back. She calls back about 15 minutes later asking if I can please go back in and finish his computer, and from now on I can decide when the best time to take my lunch. And it was never talked about again. It was nice being able to go home early when I didn't my lunch again. TLDR, I am told exactly when I am to take my lunch, until a director, who is married to the superintendent, wants his computer fixed during my lunch time. Edit 2. Thank you kind Redditor, S. For my very first awards, silver and gold. Need me to adhere to the dress code right now? Enjoy the fallout. I was reminded of this story from my work by one of my coworkers. It's been maybe 5-7 years since this happened. Where I work there is a semi-strict dress code that needs to be adhered to so we look presentable when going to customers' houses. The minor details are more or less negotiable depending on who's our manager that day. We have a normal manager we see almost daily. But if he's off or it's a weekend, someone else subs in. The day this happened was a Saturday and our regular manager was off, so the duty manager for the day happened to be Mr. Hardis, whom no one liked, and he made it his life goal to make all the techs miserable. When we walked in the door we had to pass through the manager's office to get to our meeting area. My coworker Tim, name changed, walked in the door that was to the manager's office with everything looking right on his uniform but his shirt untucked. The following conversation took place. Mr. Hardis, your shirt should be tucked in. Tim, absolutely, and I will do that when I set my gear down and go to the bathroom. Mr. Hardis, no, you need to show up for work ready to work, not show up and get ready on my time. Tim, okay, let me set my stuff down and I'll go right to the bathroom and tuck it in for you. Mr. Hardis, no, you're going to tuck it in right now before you walk another step into my building. Tim, right now? Mr. Hardis, right now. So, my coworker did as instructed, unbuttoned his pants and pulled them all the way down to his ankles and proceeded to smooth out his shirt and then reach all the way down and pull his pants all the way back up and rebuttoned them. From there he immediately walked outside and called the HR hotline and told them his manager on duty just forced him to undo his pants and strip in front of him in his personal office and wouldn't allow him to go to the bathroom to tuck his shirt in. That he felt weird and uncomfortable to be around Mr. Hardis and didn't know if he had any ulterior motives. None of us are privy to what exactly happened from the phone call on, but we do know that he got laterally moved from being a tech manager to the safety team where he was no longer in charge of any subordinates. I'll make an edit to iron out some details or important things I forgot. Our job is very much union-based and as such the union book is the law of the land, so language and actions have to be very specific as to not draw ire from the union nor the business. Tim was raised in a union household by someone who was very involved in their union, so he has a very keen knowledge on how to manipulate things well within the trappings of the union handbook. He did this whole thing not next to the boss's desk but within line of sight of the door coming in and the door to the meeting room, so there were visual witnesses from the meeting room and people who trickled into work behind him who literally walked through the entire ordeal. So, there were plenty of witnesses to corroborate. Work in a call center? Need to increase talk time. Call old guys. Ask them about fishing, cars, military politics. Call old ladies. Tell them you're considering kids with your husband/wife. Ask them about their grandkids' kids. Not where's your grandkid live? But you remind me of my grandma. I bet you're the one your grandkids call when they're unsure of big choices like this. Source: got pulled into a meeting to discuss the fact that despite murdering every other KPI including upsells, NPS, Net Promoter Score, essentially how much they liked you and would recommend the company based on their experience, my AVG talk time was lower than what they wanted. Got pulled into another meeting at the end of that shift to discuss my 6-hour call with the World War II vet, and told to not worry about talk time in future. XX. Edit. Cheers for first gold. To clarify some points on the 6-hour call with Arthur, wasn't my first long call, but definitely the longest by 4 and a bit hours. Sometimes when we'd already hit targets for the day and didn't want to lower our strike rate, we'd write out a call for 45 minutes or so till the end of shift. Sometimes with genuine convo. More often we had to milk it. This call, however, took no work on my part. I got really lucky. I felt like I was talking to a version of myself who was just born in the 1920s. We had such similar takes on so many things. If I met this guy at a pub, I woulda ended up talking to him for ages as well. About an hour and a half, and he asked if I had to go and do some work since he wasn't buying or upgrading or anything. In my service voice, I told him something along the lines of, here at Giant Telco, every customer is invaluable, so my job is to make sure you're getting the most out of your telephone and internet services, and we don't put a time limit on that process. He definitely knew there was some shenanigans going on my part, as we'd talked about corporate bureaucracy, as well as everything else under the sun. I think he just assumed it was my last day or something. I managed to take multiple pee breaks, as did he, where I talked to his carer for a bit, and I even ducked down to grab some food, which I ate at my desk, just by asking him if it was alright if I popped him on hold for a couple minutes. I originally posted this as an answer for a ULPT request and had multiple suggestions to post it on here. Glad you guys liked it. Also glad I found this sub, it's hilarious. Violate written safety procedures so we don't lose $24 million. Nope. This happened about 15 years ago at a large manufacturing plant, at which I was one of 120 industrial electricians, and this happened in the department in which I was primarily responsible. These jobs pay upwards of $30 HR, and I was making $34 HR at the time. This was my career for decades before I retired last year. I now get a pension from them and fully paid health care. This wasn't just a run-of-the-mill job. This was something to take very, very seriously. TL. Doctor, violate our own written safety rules. Nope. Unless in writing. No writing. Just do it. Shit hits fan. I still want writing. They find out I'm serious, and am willing to let them lose $24,000,000. Writing provided. Our safety administrator retired, so a new guy started and decided to audit all of the lockout-tagout procedures. Lotto. Everywhere in the facility. This place employed 4,000 people and was over 1.5 million square feet, so it was a massive undertaking. Many of the machines in my department were large, multi-station transfer machines, where the part goes into several drilling, milling, tapping, boring operations, and are transferred to the next station in turn between operations. Basically, the operator loads a raw part into it, and once it comes back around to him/her, it's finished. The cycle time for this machine was about 1 minute and was a key part in expensive final products, costing upwards of $50,000 each. It was made clear to me that the company lost $50,000 for every minute the machine was idle, as a way of instilling urgency, as if I needed it. As I said, these machines had multiple stations that each had its own specialized operation to accomplish, all automatically. This, of course, involved many switches, buttons, computers, motors, encoders, drives, all of which are used in industrial automation and sequencing. Usually, when an electrical part broke on a particular station, I would shut down the electrical power for that one station to perform my repairs and replacements. All was good. and I could usually perform just about any repair within 15 minutes or less. The management people usually didn't even know anything unusual happened, as the operators were on piecework and would often skip a break to make up the shortfall, until the new lotto procedures were released for those machines. The new procedure required anyone performing repairs to lotto every station, for every kind of energy potential. This includes electrical, pneumatic, hydraulic, and gravity. Since this was a union facility, this required the services of an electrician, a plumber, a mechanic, and a millwright. It also required something like 38 individual locks to be applied by the aforementioned skilled tradespersons. It also required about 8 hours of work to complete this task. Keep in mind these were huge machines that would take up an area the size of a gymnasium, and cost tens of millions of dollars to buy. When I saw the new lotto procedure, I grabbed my boss and the production supervisor and showed it to them and explained, in detail, why this was ridiculous, unnecessary, and unworkable. My boss got the safety administrator, and we all had a conference, and I was told, basically, that's the way it is. The very next day a type of switch called a proximity switch failed on one of these machines. Normally, a 5-10 minute repair. Cue malicious compliance. I dutifully informed the production supervisor that he lost his machine for the rest of the shift and half the following shift. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Dude, I'm dead serious." I got my boss, told him I needed 38 lotto locks, a plumber, a mechanic, and a millwright. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. "Remember the conversation we had yesterday? It just got real. Show me why you need 38 locks." Okay, and I brought him to the machine, pulled a 10-page illustrated, notated, laminated lotto procedure off the machine, and counted where each and every lock needs to go. 38. And I need the other tradesmen here as well. I figure the machine will be rendered safe by the end of the shift. Matt can do the repair, and another 4 hours to remove the locks and set the machine up to be ready to run by their lunchtime. Also, keep in mind that there will be cribbing to make the gravity potential safe, and most locks need a special kind of hardware to apply to valves and other devices to be able to function correctly. Just fix it the way you usually fix it. My boss told me, "Put it in writing." I said, "Just fix the damn thing," was his unhelpful reply. "I think you need to give it to me in writing, or you need to get my union rep here. Those are your 2 choices. I'm not gonna get fired over this." About this time, several men in suits and ties showed up to find out what the problem is. Called into action by the production supervisor I previously mentioned. He and I had a great working relationship, and he knew what was going down, so he started making phone calls when I let him know his machine was broke. To make a long story short, an hour-long meeting was held which included my union rep, after which I was provided written permission to make the repairs as I always had. The new safety administrator had been properly scolded and learned a lesson. Management learned to just let wire not do his job, and the machine was running 10 minutes after I received the paper. That was a loss of $3.5 million according to their math. It would have been $24 million lost if I had to follow their procedures to the letter. All new procedures were put in place with much input from my colleagues and me. This was a test case for how the other 500 skilled tradespeople were going to be proceeding with the new safety guy, as they had also been provided with new, ridiculous lotto procedures. It just turned out that I was the first to have to implement them. Edit. I wrote this as a kind of catharsis. As I recall this yesterday, I just started writing a journal of sorts for myself, and when I was done, it struck me it would fit in well in the sub, so I cleaned it up, removed specifics, and copy-pasted it. I had no clue it would go supernova. I'm glad it struck a chord, surprised at the similarity of others' experience, and glad people not involved in manufacturing got a glimpse of what it's about. And thank you so much for the awards. I'm so glad I decided to post it. You guys are awesome. Partner, maliciously, complies to my profile pic request. This is a more light-hearted post, so please enjoy. Me, 29F, and my partner, 28M, had been together for about 2 years at this point, back in 2017. And he had a penchant for posting Facebook profile pictures that were not him. He'd post a meme, or a video game character, or something in that nature. primarily because he had so few pictures of himself and also because he was just a little bit of a jokester. Now, I'd taken some nice photos of him and us in those 2 years, so I suggested that his next profile picture, since he was looking to change it, be of something I tagged him in. Of course, I'm thinking it'll be some cute couple photo or perhaps a photo I took of him. Next time I was on Facebook, I saw he'd updated his photo, and it was a picture of 2 pizza pies. We'd gone to this restaurant about 3 months prior, and I tagged each pie with our names, to signify who had ordered what. I, playfully, confronted him about it and had to admit that yes, he'd taken my suggestion to the letter. It stayed as profile pic for a year, edit. Wow, thank you all so much for the awards and upvotes. I'm glad to have shared something that may have brightened your collective days, especially considering how bleak it all is out there right now. Some people were interested in what we got on our pizzas. It's a pizzeria in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, NYC called Barboncino. I got the margarita pizza and he got the sopressata picante pizza. Edit 2. I just noticed the giant post header once I linked the restaurant, so I decided to unlink and edit the above just in case that's a rule violation. Overtime is no longer allowed? Okay. The players. Fake names. Owner, Jack. Direct supervisor, Will. Colleague, Paula. Myself. Backstory. I began working payroll at 16 years old. I am incredibly good with numbers, as well as dealing with clients. Suffice it to say I am wonderful at what I do. Many years ago I began working with a very small payroll company with only 4 workers. I really liked the owner, Jack, and honestly still do. He is a decent dude. I also really liked the work and the clients. However, I was not fond of Paula or Will. Paula missed so much work and I'm pretty sure no one has 5 grandfathers that died within 3 years. She doesn't figure much into this story, other than to showcase that she was not a good employee. Will was the worst supervisor I have ever had. He took smoke breaks every 30 minutes. He always thought he was right. He was very racist, sexist, and boy he loved to talk. There were times where he was monologuing to a client who had hung up 30 minutes prior. No, I am not exaggerating. However, he was the owner's father-in-law whose prior business went bankrupt. Basically, he was never going to be fired. In that work setting I absolutely shined. I was the best employee by a huge margin. The malicious compliance. Will calls me into his office and lets me know that I am getting too much overtime. This was a small business and I needed to be careful. Now I never took much overtime. Overall I usually had around 5 minutes by the end of the week, simply because I lived 5 minutes away and clocked in when I got in and settled. Even if it was a minute early, I agreed to the new rule with a bit of glee. From then on if I got in early I would get ready to clock in and then play on my phone or read for 1 minute before clocking in. This drove Will absolutely crazy. After I did this for a few days he called me back into his office. He told me about the good old days when people would work even without pay in order to excel at life. I politely reminded him that we were a payroll company so he should be aware that it is illegal to not pay workers for time worked. From that point on he would simply mutter under his breath and glare at me. The aftermath. After 3-4 weeks the owner, Jack, calls me into his office. Apparently Will had been complaining about me, about how I wasn't working hard, and was being disrespectful. I explained the situation to him and pointed out that no clients had ever been unhappy with me, that I showed up to work every day on time, and that I had the most duties with the least problems. Basically, I reminded him I was his only good employee. Jack was a little shocked and annoyed that my tiny amount of overtime was the reason I was sitting in his office. He told me that if I needed it I could have up to 30 minutes of overtime without needing it to be approved. And he also gave me a small raise for being such a hard worker. Finally, he told me that if Will ever gave me another rule that I disagreed with I should go directly to him. Jack then called Will into his office and I heard quite a bit of yelling. When Will came back out he looked like he had just sucked a lemon. It is my fondest memory of Will. Edit. Thank you all for all these awards. I can't believe my post has blown up this much. Want me to BS a review to get more business? Have fun losing money. Several years have passed since this incident and the people involved have either forgotten about this or don't lurk around this subreddit. Either way, names have been changed for privacy reasons. Background. I was working as a contactor for a big firm where clients go to for specific services and then we are assigned to the company on a subcontractor basis. The firm charges the clients an arm, a leg and a kidney or two while paying us a tiny percentage of the sales. Business is business and I can't complain about that. When it's time to renew the contract with the client, every 3 months, we are supposed to write a review about what's going on and what should be done in the next term. Now for the story. I worked on that project for 2 months and I had a very good relationship with the employees and their CEO and everything was peachy until my company wanted the client to pay double for additional services and wanted me to write a bogus review stating that their current situation was absolute shit and they should go for the new and improved plan. Moreover, I was supposed to do it by 7 p.m. 5 hours away and it was my day off. I was in the middle of a trip with friends and I said no can do and hang up. It was Friday. I didn't check my emails until Monday morning. Guess who woke up to 17 emails from the company and 2 from my client? I checked the client's email first and the CEO had personally emailed me asking what was going on and why was my company pressuring them to sign a new contract when the old one was still active. I didn't say anything and told him that I'll check it out and get back to him. Not a minute passed before I got a call from the team leader. TL, why didn't you write the report on Friday? Me, on my day off? TL, you should be available whenever we want you to do something. Me, what if I was sick or in the hospital? What would you have done then? TL, but you were not. And we expect you to do as we say because you are bound by employee rule book. Me, as you may know, I'm not one of your employees, but a contractor. We have specific dates and times we work and you can't just call me on a day off and ask me to work out of the blue. That would be against my contract with your company. By the way, since the client's current contract is still active for a month, the review has to be written after the contract ends, not before. It's even written in the contract you signed off. TL, I don't care about semantics. Write a review by the end of the day. Me, I'm not going to BS the review. TL, you have to do as we say or else you're fired. Malicious compliance time. He said I had to write the BS review, but didn't mention anything about the real review. So, I wrote the real review and under that I wrote, the review Mr. asked me to write and wrote the BS review. Send it to the client and CC the TL, all the other contractors, the execs and anyone who had the faintest idea about the project. I wish I was there to see their faces when they received the email. Best part? They tried to fire me, but couldn't due to the terms of the contract. So I had no work, but full pay for 4 months. My PC was locked, so I went to the office every day, brushed up my resume and started sending emails all day while having free coffee tea. The client I was working for hired me the next week as a freelance consultant, so I was getting double the income, though for 4 months. And stopped going to the company altogether. The CEO was a powerful guy and he immediately sent an email to all the businesses he knew and no one renewed their contract, resulting in net loss of a couple million a year per company. I heard 1 or 2 companies took them to court for falsifying reports, but not sure what happened to them. TLDR, company asked me to write a BS review to scare a client into paying more for the same services. It cost them dearly in the end. Respond to all emails, or else. So on my previous job position, I was working as an expert on vehicle damages, mostly superficial with some exceptions. But we were outsourcing for Germany. I live in a small country called Macedonia. So all the evaluations were done electronically. We were sent pictures and reports of the car's conditions and we move on from there. Now, a lot of the people tasked with taking these pictures did a poor job of them and we had to send back almost half of what we received daily. To get a real picture of the actual problem in question for each car, our boss from Germany, as stingy as can be human, didn't like this at all, because he only cared about numbers. So on several occasions he, once or twice screaming even, bashed us with saying I don't care about the pictures, just calculate the damage as high as possible. Cue malicious compliance. No problem boss. We started sorting through the images and reporting everything that looked off as a damage. Soon, the company started to get reclamations for sums exceeding $2,000 for a hood door scratch, with explanations ranging from, whole door distorted, image was compressed, paint smudged, image blurred, and so on. But the creme de la creme was a colleague of mine that had a moment of brilliance. He got a picture of the front part of the car, taken from driver's side, with damage reported as rear bumper scratched. He immediately returned an evaluation of back part of the car is missing. Honda Civic 2010, evaluated cost of repair, new CAR $10,000. 1 month later, our local coordinator informed us that the whole team of people taking pictures of the cars has been changed and we'll start getting better pictures. We didn't, but at least we weren't yelled at for our requests anymore. Edit. I now noticed that the headline might be a bit misleading. Sorry about that. D. Nutrition course asked me to write a detailed story from the POV of a chicken sandwich being eaten. My nutrition course asked me to write a short story from the point of view of a chicken sandwich being eaten. They specifically asked it to be detailed about the journey through the digestive system. So I made this. They asked for detail, so I gave them detail. No. I think this is fat. Chrissy's sausage fingers lifted me off of the wrapper, towards his nasty, crusty mouth. His yellowed chiclets sunk into me, and tore off a bit. He smacked his lips as he crushed that chunk of me and added his saliva, turning me into a slimy mush. Next thing I knew, I was sliding down this man's gullet, down his esophagus, and into his stomach. I'm broken down by this bitter, stinging acid, turning me into even slimier mush called chyme. The protein of my chicken is disintegrated into peptides. Next I slip further down the GI tract, into the small intestine, where I'm broken down even more, and then these tiny, worm-like tethers, called villi and microvilli, start to absorb me. All my monosaccharides, amino acids, and fatty acids disappear before my eyes. I accept my fate, and become one with the fat. As I slide further, I feel dehydrated. There's bacteria having a battle within me. I am wasting away. Soon enough, I feel some pressure, and there's a burst of bright light as I am returned to the outside world. I land in a nice refreshing pool, which, may I add, has the worst view. After a while, the cow of a man gets up, then there's a whirlpool, and I am suddenly plunged back into darkness. I showed my instructor. She was excited to read it since she was my teacher for creative writing and she always liked my stories. As she read it, her smile faded. When she finished reading, she looked at me with the most disgusted and disturbed look on her face. Me and my friends were laughing our asses off. Edit. I feel that I should clarify a couple things. My instructors don't make most of the lessons for my classes. I work in an online-only program, so we mostly use an education website with professionally made lessons. They have access to my lessons and answers though. The lesson was expecting a blunt description of the digestive system using what I had learned so far, which isn't much because of severe medical issues later last year. It gave a sample answer after I submitted mine. It was just regurgitated information from the lesson, written in first-person POV, with no creativity at all. I worked ahead of schedule, but I guess I don't work for you anymore. This is a story one of my coworkers told me while we were chatting in the lab. He's a recent hire after getting laid off from one of the big 3 car companies. An unfortunately very common history for someone to have in my area. However, he was cheered up immensely because of how badly they'd screwed themselves by letting him go. He told me how the company had him specialize in a very technical software project, being the only guy who knew how to use the requisite tools and being the de facto expert on how the code was structured and how it worked. No one else felt the need to get up to speed or brush up on it because he handled it all. He had so much free time, being put on no other assignments, that he ended up working way ahead of schedule and finishing not only the software but the security audits, reports, and all sorts of documentation that would have been necessary once the project was finalized. He kept these pre-produced deliverables on his personal directory so that he could have them ready in a flash when the company asked for them. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Well, a car company's favorite pastime is layoffs, and they decided he was no longer necessary and canned him. In retrospect, their unwillingness to get him started on any other project was a red flag. Knowing exactly what kind of hot water they'd be in without him, he happily deactivated his employee account and subsequently deleted everything on his personal drive. The remaining project team members rapidly discovered how screwed they were when they tried to provide a status on his software and realized none of them knew anything about how it worked. how finished it was, or how to continue working on it. No one had bothered to have it explained while he was still there. One of his buddies on the team called him up a few days later begging him to help him out and just let them have the files he'd completed ahead of time. My coworker felt conflicted because he had no real grudge against the employees who were stuck in this situation. But obviously no one had those files anymore since he was no longer an employee. He basically told his friend that the company had dug its own grave and he couldn't help in any way besides giving him some tips off the top of his head from what he remembered. He told me he somewhat regretted helping them out on his own time, but ultimately just hoped management learned their lesson. And because I've read similar stories on this sub, I told him that's when you call back and give them your quote for freelance work. TLDR, faithful employee works hard enough to finish most of a project ahead of schedule, but the company lays him off. He takes all his work with him and everyone else realizes they don't know how to do anything he did. The coffee machine? Okay. Hope you don't mind which one. So this one happened just a few days ago in my own home and my partner's ability to do malicious compliance in real life cracks me up. So I wanted to share this one. For Christmas, I got my partner a Keurig. He's an avid coffee drinker and before this he had a Trissimo. But for personal reasons we live in my mother's crowded house and the Trissimo, while brand new when opened, came pretty much broken. But it's all he had access to and it's all we could afford. The thing can't run without making a ton of noise, but I know my house too well and can honestly tell you no one takes care of anything. Everyone uses my stuff and constantly breaks it or wrecks it in some way and are woefully unapologetic about it. I'm just used to it. But when I spent all this money on the Keurig I wanted it to be just for my partner. Since my mother said no one else drinks coffee in their house, she wasn't really wrong. They, for the most part, drink barely anything caffeinated. However recently, since the Keurig is left in the kitchen, we've both come to realize that they had intentions of using the Keurig without our permission. Not that we would normally mind, but in the last 2 weeks alone about 3 things of mine have been broken. We weren't taking that risk and moved it down to my room. It has produced no smell and was making no fuss. But, while out the other day, I received a text questioning where the coffee machine went. I know she's not that clueless because she's talked to me about the Keurig before. When she was considering buying him one for Christmas, she just tried to play dumb so I wouldn't know she wanted it upstairs for them to use it. When I told her it was downstairs for convenience she went off. It all boiled down to it can't be downstairs in your room because I said so, and to make it look like it wasn't about using the machine she even threw in some stuff about moving out if we wanted to live like we had our own apartment and whatnot. I was livid. My partner however determined that he wasn't going to let them use whatever Keurig pods they bought and didn't want to tell us they had. So my partner brought his old Tassimo back upstairs. The look on my mom and her fiancé's face was priceless. They looked so annoyed and wouldn't even speak to us nor say a word. They won't dare ask why the Keurig isn't upstairs. It's been about 2 days since then, and my mother still shoots us daggers whenever my partner makes coffee. Thank you for watching. Daily uploads.